Hello everyone, my name is Mireia, I'm a Eurodesk intern, and today we are here with Nikolina and Sabri, who will interview in the topic of accommodation. Hello both of you, how are you?
Hi, very good, can't complain.
Good. Thank you, nice to be here.
A bit special weather today, I think we're back to the normal Brussels.
Exactly, it's really giving Brussels vibes. I feel better now. It was too hot this summer.
So we start always with the same question, if you can introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are and what are you doing.
Okay, so I'm Nikolina, or Nina, and I'm the communication manager at the Erasmus Student Network. This is my colleague.
Yeah, I'm Sabri and I'm comms officer at the ESN, Erasmus Student Network.
Not European Student Network, Erasmus Student Network.
Good to point it out. So you are all working in ESN. Can you tell us a bit more about this organization?
Yes, so ESN is the biggest student organization working in the field of mobility. We have around 41 member country and around over 500 local branches. So they all work on the local level. They mostly work to support students, incoming and outgoing, who want to go on mobility. And on the national, international level, it's mostly policy work, advocacy, trying to improve mobility, making it, inclusive, greener, more accessible, the whole thing. And yeah, we've been around for almost 33 years now. And we have around 15,000 volunteers, and I think on a yearly basis we reach around 500,000 people with our events and initiatives and everything. So it's good numbers.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And what is your relation with the topic of this interview today?
Well, I think both of us is working in communication. We do get a lot of questions on the topic of accommodation, and in general, with the helping students and everything, we do work a lot on the topic, both with the students and also with institutions. I'm sure Sabri has.
Yeah. One of the things we do is, of course, to implement the strategy of ESN, which is what basically students want to have via projects and, as Nina said, initiatives. One of the key projects we have currently is called Home, and this is really a project about student accommodation, facilitating access to quality offers, and really understanding what is a quality offer and so on. And this is just one of the things we do. So, for example, Home is actually the child of a previous project. We also did some research previously to understand a bit the data about student housing. Like, we have 70 million students in Europe, and then like 1.5 million going mobility. And then we did research to understand, okay, how is a barrier like access to student accommodation affecting them?
And when we talk about young people looking for accommodation, how do you see the current situation?
Well, it's a bit bleak. There are many challenges. The easiest all of them are hard challenges, right? But let's start with the easiest one. The first one is that there is a lack of offers. The industry of infrastructure or just building houses is not providing, so the offer is not there, but the demand is rising. More and more people want to go on mobility, but the offers are not there. Another issue is simply related to the economy. So prices are rising, and this means that the resources the students have is not increasing at the same time, which means that fewer and fewer people can afford to have an accommodation. And even if they do find it, there is the issue, especially when it comes to mobility students, of understanding what's the legislation when I come to another country, how do contracts work there, how do I resolve, for example, if I have an issue with the owner or vice versa. And these are just some of the issues. Another issue is that, for example, the attitude of students change. This is maybe something I can specify a bit more later. This is very interesting, especially in a post-pandemic context. What does a quality accommodation mean for students? What do students want? What can housing providers offer to them? And what are the specific needs that mobility students have when it comes to accommodation? And
So the main problems or obstacles that young people face when they are looking for accommodation abroad are the legislation of different countries, and what else can it be?
It's a lot of things. It's also a lot of prejudice. Already when you're a student, you face a lot of prejudice based on your age and social status. A lot of people won't rent to students because they're not so financially secure. You don't know, you don't have their bank statements, and also they're younger, so people don't take them very seriously. There's also the issue of gender. People tend to prefer female tenants because, they think they're more responsible and cleaner and all of that. Gender, right? Yeah. Nice. And then there's also, everything else like racism, homophobia, all the other prejudice based on everything else, like religion as well, ethnicity. And then when you're actually an international student, it kind of goes on the next level, which is you're an international student. People tend to prefer local students, and they also want to kind of support the local students more. I mean, you see it right now in the Netherlands. It's a whole mess. I mean, it's always been a bit difficult when you're an international student in the Netherlands because, well, there's a lot of them. But now it's even worse because now, for years, it's been an issue, but now it's really, really terrible to the level that people are thinking of dropping out. And actually some universities, like the University of Amsterdam, is thinking about putting caps on how many international students, because they just can't. I mean, you take their tuition fee, you accept them, but then they have nowhere to live. So they either have to move or live further away from the city. It's just not really accessible for them. So, and of course, with international mobility, especially, it's the problem, or just going abroad to study in general, finances. Students usually go to better developed countries, let's say, where the standard of living is higher. So immediately it means that also prices are higher and not everyone can afford it. So there's also then another issue of, let's say, privilege to it, because then only people who can actually afford to study abroad and get better education or just go abroad for an exchange can access it. And grants, like Sabri said, prices are rising, but scholarships and grants are not changing at all. So people have to spend their entire scholarship or entire grant, monthly Erasmus Plus grant, just on accommodation. And then what do you do with food? What do you do with actually, living your life abroad? So it's just overall terrible.
Yeah. And in your opinion, how can these problems be solved?
I think there has to be a lot of institutional support. I mean, it's really it's shocking and terrible to think that some universities are thinking of putting caps, but it is more humane, honestly, rather than just taking their money and just letting them out, high and dry, no support whatsoever. So universities either have to support students better, offer actual housing, or just offer support in finding accommodation. They also have to work with regional or city governments to, build maybe housing, or make sure that local or national legislations to housing are a bit stricter so that there's no discrimination, or that prices don't start skyrocketing. In my country, for example, in Serbia right now, even for people who are working, it's too expensive to afford accommodation, let alone for students and their families who have to support themselves and their students who are studying in a different city or in a different country. So there has to be, I think definitely institutional support is the key here and nothing else. I mean, you really can't change the mindset of a nation when it comes to certain discrimination. It's not so easy, but I think if universities were supporting and making sure that students are treated fairly or that they're given equal access, it changes.
I can completely identify with what you said about your country, because I'm from Spain, so the situation is kind of the same. And what you receive as a salary and more in your first job, it's not enough to pay a rent and the food and the life cost. So it's really difficult, the situation right now. Yeah. But changing a bit the topic, Sabri, you mentioned before that you are working in this project called Home.
Yes.
What else can you tell us about this project?
Yeah, so I think it's quite interesting. So Project Home, it's a simple but at the same time complex project. And this is, I think, a good sign of good projects, because it means that there is a lot of work in the background, but then the result must be easy and accessible for everybody. So the thing is this: if you think about it, I mean, you might not know it, but when it comes to other realities like hotels, for example, they have a standard of things that the hotel has to offer. Like, for example, rooms and certain services and so on. And these constitute a standard, okay, which is a data standard. So it's a standard of data related to hotels, let's say. But such a thing is not there when it comes to student housing, because it's something which is still changing with the increase of mobility. Now we're putting more of focus on this. And so one of the first things we did was to create a data standard, which was digital, which means to analyze with research and so on, a lot of offers. In the partnership, we also have, for example, housing providers. Then we collected all of the information about housing, which are important to know. For example, number of rooms, whether the offer is accessible, for example, wheelchair accessible, a lot of things. And so we have a big database, which is digital. What we did as a next step, after we create this digital data standard, which was already nice, but it's still too technical, how do you use this? Okay, now we have the data, So what we did was to streamline this into labels, which we call home quality labels. For example, if you have, a certain number of rooms, if it's well accessible, and if you have X, Y, and Z, you are eligible to have for example, the label of accessibility. In another case, you might have the label of premium. If you have, for example, 24/7 concierge service, for example, and so on and so forth. So we have a number of labels. And again, okay, what do you do with this? Now we have the labels. So we need to go to the actual action. And the last step, which is I think the most ambitious, which is what we're working on now, is to integrate this system, so digital data standard and then the labels, into the Erasmus Plus app, which is like the one stop. It's like the main access point, and it's going to be more and more the main access point to Erasmus mobilities. So what would happen is that once you go to the app, you already have a lot of services there. One of the things is that you will be able to apply. You have access to many information as well about mobilities and services. You can also find accommodation there. But the thing is that you're not gonna just find random data of housing providers putting their offer there. You have the filter of home, which helps to ensure that the offer is more qualitative. And so there is a participatory approach between, for example, you have the institutional part, in this case European Union, but you also have housing providers who agree with the labels, what the quality of what the home quality labels entail, and so on. And then you can find accommodations there. I think this is a very, very important thing. Now you might think, okay, but like this you have less offers. But there is a problem here. This is what Nina also said. Sometimes less is better, because if you have more, you might also have more bad in the whole pool. So at least you know that everything that is there is good. So so after COVID, one of the things that happened is that we did a roundtable with students, housing providers, and institutions, and we understood that the preferences changed. Okay, so the preferences when it comes to accommodation changed. When students were studying and were forced to study from home, the way they were using their accommodation changed. So they could live a bit away from the city center to afford to have, for example, better prices. At the same time, they wanted more space inside. Internet had to be stronger, and so on and so forth. But the accommodations at the time and the offers were not ready for that. And this means that there was not a resiliency in the system that would allow students to have what they needed. So you have a lot of issues. People decided just outright to go back home, and so on and so forth. Now, this is okay because it was a crisis, very fast, we didn't expect it. Okay, but what do you do now? Not only for the next pandemic, but you're going from pandemic to war, and then maybe simply with the digitalization.
Yeah, it's not going well.
It's not going well, all right? But if you have digitalization, for example, maybe you're going to have more people who cannot go to a mobility at all, but with digital tools, maybe they can have different things. Maybe they go less to the university and they study a bit from home. So there are changing. It's a changing environment, and having new tools that would allow you to have good offers that really respond to what you need is the way to go. It's not the whole solution. So there is, for example, a lot of cooperation needed, as Nina said, with institutions, municipalities, and housing providers, and then of course student organizations, because you need to know what students need. And there is still a long way to go here. We're progressing, but there is a lot of work. But this is what we're doing at home.
Yeah, but it looks really nice. It's like a first step. Also, what you said, maybe there's less offers, but if you're sure that these are good accommodations and they're trustworthy and all stuff,
yes.
that's really important. And more when you're a student, because maybe sometimes it's your first time looking for accommodation, so you're a bit lost, you don't know where to look. So I think it's really, really important, the work that you're doing there. And a bit like in this path, what are the most important things that young people need to know and bear in mind where they are looking for accommodation?
Well, I think first, and I think anybody who's ever looked for accommodation knows this, just beware of scammers. They're everywhere, honestly. So look for the common red flags, if they're asking you to pay in cash, if there's no contract, if they ask to pay in like sketchy ways, like maybe PayPal or cryptocurrency, stuff like that. So, but just make sure that also that your kind of rights, so that contract is obligatory and you really have to be protected in some way. But also when it comes to other advice, I would say that to look for, because like we said, universities, there's not a lot of support from universities or other institutions. So you kind of have to fend for yourself and look for support. So one of the ways is that you look for other groups of people. Like, I don't know, on Facebook, you have a lot of groups for students, for housing as well. Brussels has like 10 million Facebook groups for housing alone.
Yes.
You get a lot of advice. And then, I don't know, also there's groups for university students. So maybe your university has a group where you can get some advice on maybe which neighborhoods are better, or maybe somebody's already looking for a housemate or something. I'm sure that there's a lot of also websites and stuff where they're kind of matching. I know that we have one in Serbia as well. And then last, maybe, this is self-promo here, but also honestly looking for student organizations in the city directly. I mean, myself as have been running ESN channels from the local level to the international, and we get a lot. I mean, I think the most questions that we get come from students looking for accommodation, where, how, I don't know where to look, how do I look, who do I ask? So looking for local branches, well, in this case ESN, but any student organization might be very helpful, because at least I can vouch for ESN that they know what they're doing, because they get at least 10 students every semester, if not 1,000 or 3,000, like in some countries. So they definitely know what they're doing. And if they can't help you just look for accommodation themselves, they're going to give you advice. They might have someone local to support you, to help with the language barrier, with just, giving you advice. So yeah, we're there to help.
And that's really good, because that's also makes people a bit more comfortable to be, okay, I'm going to do the step and I'm going to move abroad and let's see what happens.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really important to have always like some organization or somebody that you know that can give you support and help with these situations.
Exactly.
So this was actually my last question. So maybe do you have a final message for the people that is watching this interview?
I think just stay in the loop. Just follow what we do with ESN. And also other organizations that are working on this field, but especially what we do with ESN is really to work on various things that are related directly to the student needs, to the needs of international students as well. So stay in the loop and get engaged. This is very important, because most of the work that we do really requires the direct input of youth, of students. And with that, we can make sure that the work is relevant, that we can adapt it, and then that we can build on that, and so on. So yeah, that's all from my side.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think hearing the voice of students is very important. I mean, it really pains me to hear the horror stories that they go through, but it's also very important because then we can go to universities when we have meetings with the national agencies or with the commission even, and say, okay, this is a big problem. These are the stories that we heard, to have actual examples, because then it makes it a bit more tangible than say, oh, every student has a problem with this. But also don't get discouraged. I mean, be resourceful and just look for information in the right places, because I don't think that accommodation is scary. I know it myself. I had to look for accommodation every single year of my studies, and even in Brussels. But it shouldn't deter you from taking on these experiences, going abroad to study, or even just going to a different city to study. People have done it before you. You can do it as well, I'm sure.
And I think just one thing, because I want to end on a positive note. I mean, we're discussing about the issue, but this doesn't mean that people don't go to mobility.
Exactly.
Yeah? Just do some expectation management. Like if you start already to look from offers before you apply for university, you know that a certain city or state or whatever you want to go has more offers, is more accessible to you also economically, then adjust your expectations and then plan in advance, so that you know that if there is a city that has more accessibility, for example, economically, you can access it more, and there are more offers that respond more to your needs. Maybe it's not the best place you want to go, but it's still very good. So that's the way to go, because still the benefits of mobility outweigh the challenges in terms of socioeconomic. You have advantages socioeconomically, professionally, from the point of view of skills, education. It's too much to miss on that. There's too much. So plan in advance. That's my final advice.
Yeah, I think everybody here have this experience. We all went abroad, and it's really open-minded and like life-changing experience. 100%. I would say you completely change, like meet people from everywhere, and you change your point of view of so much things, and it's so worth it. So that this doesn't discourage you to go, and just plan in advance as you said, and it's completely worth it, and
so worth it. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you very much, both of you, for coming today.
Thank you for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you.